Welcome to another episode of the InfoTech Growth Partner Podcast, the podcast where the future of IT unfolds, and we dive deep into the pertinent developments in regards to IT and data with leaders and experts in the IT consulting field. My name is Jasper, and today I have the distinct pleasure to have Chris Muir on the call. Chris is a sales and marketing director at ProScope for NetSuite, and it's great to have you on the show, Chris. Welcome.
Thank you, Jasper. It's really good to be here. Thank you for the invite. Looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. If you can give the audience just a bit of an introduction about your background, about ProScope for NetSuite, and of course what your role within the company is as well.
Sure. So I've worked in sales and marketing for 25 plus years across various parts of the tech industry. Initially more to do with hardware and devices than software, but for the last 7 or 8 years I've worked in software in sales and marketing roles for a couple of different companies. Been at ProScope now for 14 months, I think. ProScope is a software solution that sits on top of the Oracle NetSuite solution, hence the NetSuite part of the name. We add some enhanced functionality to parts of NetSuite that is required for certain types of industries. And my role within the company is running all of sales and marketing on a global basis. So, our go-to-market strategy, our kind of expansion plans, our customer acquisition and customer retention conversations all sit with me.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And as you said, you have quite some couple of years experience in software.
Yes.
I think before that, you were also very involved in digital transformation projects and getting businesses from an archaic state to a more robust and more scalable business. And I think that's at least something I want to touch upon as the first topic. Can you, based on your experience, your insights, can you give us some insight into the common pitfalls that you see and common challenges that you see related to getting businesses, as you said, from that archaic state to a more robust and scalable business?
Yeah, it's. I think it really starts with the point where businesses decide that they need to do something, and in my experience, what often happens is there's a trigger for that, and that trigger is quite often outside of the control of the business themselves. So that could be they're on a solution that is going end of life, or they're being forced to do an upgrade, and that upgrade is really expensive, and that triggers them looking at something else. And one of the challenges around that is that it means that they often don't really consider why they're doing it for the good of the business. And fundamentally, if you're going to do a digital transformation, if you're going to do anything that is going to make a major change to business, and in my line of work in enterprise resource planning, ERP, it's been described by other people as the heartbeat of the business. It's the system that operates all of the finance function and and many other things aside, and ripping that out of a company and replacing it is a significant challenge. So the first thing I would absolutely say is I've engaged with many businesses that haven't really thought about how they can make the best and maximize the benefits from doing such a thing, because what's happened is it's been pushed on them and they've had to consider something very quickly. So being ready, be prepared, thinking about the outcomes, thinking about what they want to achieve. So that's number one. I think number two is involving the people within the business that actually make a difference. Again, you will often see companies think about this at a senior level or a mid-senior level and not involve the people that are actually going to be using the software on a day-to-day basis, not consider how that's going to impact them. So change management is a major topic of conversation that a lot of companies don't actually think about. How are they going to get user adoption to the place where it has been? I remember speaking to a customer not long after I joined NetSuite in 2016 who were just about to go live on their new ERP system, and I spoke to the management accountant in the business, and he basically said to me, I haven't even looked at NetSuite yet because I'm scared of what I'm going to find. I've used Sage for 20 years and I don't know what's going to happen. So that business had just not thought about how they got him from here to here. They hadn't involved him in the process. And sort of coupled with all of that, I think that the scale of a digital transformation project can be huge. And again, you can see some companies and businesses try to take on too much at one time. Lots of software vendors will push this idea that you have to do everything in one big massive hit, because why wouldn't you do it like that? But actually, if you can break it down into smaller sections and do what needs fixed the most at the first point in time, but then have a quicker implementation time, a quicker go live, a point to reflect on what's worked and what hasn't before you move into the next stage, it can make a big difference to how successful it is, and very few companies think like that.
Yeah, those are some of the really common challenges that I see as well in those businesses. And as you said, it can be pretty daunting to replace your ERP because it's the core of your business. You're using that on a daily basis for whatever it is, finance, HR, whatever. So it's actually a very big thing. And as you mentioned, there's always a change that actually triggers people to do that, a specific, big change, which if you're not prepared for, then you have to make quick decisions. It can have pretty significant problems down the line. So I think what you want to suggest here as well is start thinking about it now. Start thinking about what it's going to come. What change can we actually foresee? Or at least let us just start preparing for what does the business need over the next couple of years, and then start preparing on how an ERP, and that's in this case, would fit in there. Can you, based on your experience again, share some interesting real-world examples of such transformations that you've been through with companies, or even stories that you heard, where things have been done well?
Yeah.
And also, maybe if you can get a little bit of insight on what actual maybe tangible business value actually got out of those transformations.
Yeah, and I think the value point is a really good one. I was going to ask you if you'd come across that in the work that you do, but I think and value is one of the key things where I've seen success. So we work with an organization right now actually who use our solution alongside NetSuite, and one of the interesting elements of the conversations that happened when they were going through the selection process is they had clearly earmarked the areas that they felt they were going to get value out of a new solution compared to their old solution, and had a clear plan in place that once they had gone through each of the stages of implementation, they were going to measure that result. And I probably, in all of my time in software, working with probably a couple of hundred companies, only seen that a handful of times. Only really seen that a handful of times. And so when you do see it, what you get out the other end is a customer who really understands whether they've got value or not. Now, if they haven't got value, then that's going to cause you a problem as a vendor, right, or a supplier. But if they've done it properly, then they almost will. And most software companies will have value management teams that will talk about that stuff up front. It's how you transfer that through the project that's actually really crucial. And it kind of links a little bit to the idea that this whole part about preparation is really important. And one of the other things that I've seen people do really well, and it kind of, again, links to this preparation piece, the idea that as you're going through this process, you're not just changing a software solution, you should also be looking at how you can improve your business. Right? So the idea that you replace an antiquated system with a new system, you're going to get some benefit from that. Of course you will, because it will look better, it will be easier to use, it will be faster, of course, it will be cloud, therefore you can access it from anywhere. But actually, if you look at it and say, well, as I'm going through this, I'm going to consider how I run my finance function, and maybe how we set it up 20 years ago when we bought this software solution isn't actually the best way to do it anymore. There might be better ways of doing it right now, and how can we leverage those better ways and actually make the company better, not just the software better. And that leads to value, right? Because that could mean in a not so nice way, you don't need as many people because what you're doing is more efficient, for example. Or it could mean, and this is something I've seen a lot with businesses, is businesses looking to scale rapidly without having to add lots of headcount, and they need a much better system with better processes to allow that to happen. And that does happen a lot. I've seen that on a number of occasions. The other example is an interesting one, actually. I was working with a company in the travel sector actually a few years ago and I was talking to the CFO at the business, and we were quite far down the cycle of them confirming they wanted to buy our product. They were happy with everything, and I met with the CFO more just for a catch-up than anything specific, and we were having a conversation. And he was actually telling me about all the other IT projects that they had on the go at that point in time. And it struck me at that point in time that they just weren't ready as a business to buy an ERP system. And I kind of felt that if he went to his board to propose another IT project on top of the ones that had all started but hadn't finished, he probably was going to get told to go and get some stuff sorted out. So we actually agreed that they should slow down and delay the project. Now, unfortunately, it got delayed enough that COVID got in the way and their business suffered quite significantly, although fortunately survived. But I think that element of realism about what you're doing is really important. And the last piece I think that's really important about this whole process of thinking about what you're doing and being successful is organizations that think about who from their side is going to be involved in an implementation before they sign any contracts is really, really important, because the software vendor can't do everything. They can't delve into the minutiae of detail of how a business runs. And you can't have people trying to do a day job and be involved in an implementation. You've got to give them enough bandwidth and scope to be able to actually do what they need to do. Otherwise, the project will just get delayed and delayed and delayed. So I've seen that work on a couple of occasions where organizations have realized that they possibly don't have the right resource and have gone and sought that resource before they've decided to press ahead, whether that's bringing staff on permanently or part-time or using a third party. And those types of things really, really work well.
Yeah, and I think those are some very good examples that you shared. And one thing I want to double down on, and that maybe also helps us transition into the next topic that we want to discuss, is that you want to propose this and approach this, whether it's implementing a technology or a software or a new system, always from a business value perspective. And again, most companies see it as a commodity. Like they think, well, we just need an ERP because we are a business. We have a business. We need to manage processes. But if you can actually approach it from a value standpoint and actually see, like, what is the efficiency or what is the value that we can get out of it as a business and not as just some processes working together, I think that's the approach that you should take in this case as well. And then I want to transition that into looking, because I engage, of course, with a lot of what I call IT consulting, IT services organizations.
Mm.
And what you really see there is that they have an offer, they have a positioning in the market, which is like, well, we do advanced analytics, or we do data mining, or this is how we can help. But what we see is that the most successful companies approach it from a way like, we can help you solve whatever pain point, challenge, desire that you have, and it will most probably lead to this ROI or this new revenue or headcount decrease, let's say, like that. So if you can approach it from a quantifiable perspective and actually focusing on business value instead of saying we help you implement the system, that also helps you with in this case, well, acquisition, new sales, new business, and those types of things. We've discussed it earlier, and that's what I want to transition into, is that you approach, because you yourself as a sales and marketing director, you really want to approach that together, making sure that sales and marketing are synergized, and I think you called it revenue enablement.
Yeah.
Why do you think that businesses should approach it like that, like marketing, sales working together? instead of just doing it separately, let's say like that.
So it's an interesting topic that's become something that's been discussed quite recently. I actually have a friend I think I mentioned who's works for her organisation, released a white paper on it recently, which I was kind of involved in a little bit. I think, my experience from, and I've worked in businesses that have both. I've worked in businesses where there's been one organization and one leader that runs sales and marketing, and I've worked in businesses where sales and marketing and customer success and account management and everything else are very siloed. And like both can work. I think that for me, the biggest challenge around that kind of siloed organization is it just disconnects the importance of each part of each function working together. If you tied it back, the most important thing for new business salespeople is referenceability with existing customers. That referenceability comes from customer success and account management. So if they're not aligned with that as an objective, then that's going to impact new business people because they won't have anyone that their prospects can talk to. If marketing don't understand where the salespeople are targeting themselves, how can they define a marketing campaign or a marketing plan that aligns to that, right? How can we, if those things aren't connected, what happens is you get marketing going off and doing what they think is some really good stuff, and often will be some really good stuff, and it'll bring in a load of leads, but those leads might be people that the salespeople don't want to talk to or don't feel equipped to talk to because they're not in the target verticals or whatever. Now, there are plenty of businesses that make sure those connections exist, but I think if you've got it under one kind of organization, and the enablement piece, which is so key, covers that. So the salespeople are the sales organization are being enabled around marketing, and the marketing organization are being enabled around sales, and the customer success account management organization has also been enabled in that way and targeted in the right ways as well. That's key as well. What happens is you just get a structure that flows really smoothly. And if I use, albeit we are a pretty small organization, the collaboration between those parts of our business at ProScope is exceptional. Partly because I have really good people, but also because they know that we've got this common objective, and the common objective is these things, and they understand. So the marketing team understand what sales are trying to do. Sales understand what marketing are trying to do. When we build our plans for the year, the territory plan that my EMEA head might have is only done with the collaboration of marketing because exactly the enablement we do internally allows that to happen, and it's easy for me to say, here's the targets each of you have got, because it sits under this one umbrella.
Yeah, and I think like these two, well, what most companies see as distinct departments, can really empower each other. Like sales is talking to people, talking with most probably their ideal client.
Yeah.
They are gaining insights from those conversations because you can only do as much desk research. You can only see as much analytics from social media or whatever that's marketing is doing, is doing. But you can, the most way you can learn is actually directly speaking with people and testing things and asking questions and seeing what is their, what are the challenges, what are their desires. And if sales can get that back over to marketing, which marketing can again use for their targeting, for different types of messaging that speaks to specific pain points, build out specific content on social media that really resonates with this target market. Sales can empower marketing, but at the same time, it's also the other way around. Like marketing can help educate prospects, can help nurture prospects by whatever it is, sharing case studies, showcasing expertise, which will make sales a whole lot easier as well. Because what you see is that in a B2B engagement, people need to see you often and need to see you for, I think it's 7 hours of engagement before someone can actually make a decision. And if sales has to do that face to face every time. That will take a lot of time, but you can really scratch off a lot of that with, as I said, videos, content, case studies, and showcasing your expertise. So in that sense, it's so powerful, and I think it's about letting your people understand that they can empower each other and that they are not, well, competitors or at least separated within the business. I think that is really where a big enablement piece lies within most businesses, and especially in the business that we have talked with and worked with as well.
Yeah, I think that empowerment, or I think the culture is really important, for people to understand that exactly as you say, that there is no wall between the different parts of the business, and you can create that without having a CRO in place. You could create that but it's just for me. It's just anytime I've worked in that environment, it's always just been a little bit more challenging because the targets that marketing set themselves up for aren't necessarily aligned to what the sales targets are, and whereas within my business, we can create a direct link between the activity that marketing are doing and what comes out the bottom of the funnel because it's all connected completely. I think the idea that you can, well, I think that the important element of your comment around people seeing content is even more relevant now because the buying committee, if that's what you want to call them, and B2B buying decisions has grown from 3 or 4 at one point in time in the past now up to, I think the latest estimate is 15 to 17 people can be involved in a buying decision, and often now they won't engage with suppliers until they're probably 50 or 60% through the process of making a selection. Now, so if you don't have that alignment between that activity from sales to marketing, marketing to sales, then you're going to miss out on a load of stuff. I think the last thing, and this again is enablement, maybe use of tools. One of the things that I've really seen a big benefit from is the use of sales automation tools. Things like SalesLoft or Gong or those types of things where all conversations can be recorded, but they can be recorded in a way that certain things are tagged. I'm sure you've come across this stuff, but so you can trigger keywords that might tag when pricing is discussed or when pain points are discussed or something like that. And where I've seen that really useful is because you can then give that information to your marketing team and say, okay, you can't sit on every call. You're not going to read the whole load of transcripts, but here's the things that you should be interested in. You're going to hear this from our customers and potential customers. And as you said, that then allows them to adjust messaging, think about how they might target and use an ABM approach from a marketing perspective to really drill into what we do. Now, in our business, because of our partnership with NetSuite, it's really difficult for us to market ourselves and build lead generation in a conventional way. So we have to find ways of being much more targeted and much more focused in what we do. And that really emphasizes the need for all of the teams that I look after to be really closely linked together.
Yeah, and something I want to touch upon as well is what you mentioned is it's also about culture. It's also about leadership, as you mentioned, like whether or not there is a CRO or whichever job title within the business, it should be top down in that sense, making sure and exemplify that you need to be working together because it will empower each other. Another thing that I want to point out there is that what we see is that, like most businesses that we engage with who are, let's say, in that 2 to 10 million in revenue, you see that the founders, the executives do most of the sales in the beginning. They don't really have the salesperson or the business development people. Then they get to a point, of course, well, there's enough money, well, we can hire someone to take off most of the sales activities from us. But what we see is that most of those first few hires are not as successful as they think, or at least would have expected. And what we see is that the companies don't really have the sales infrastructure in place for them to be successful. And what do I mean with sales infrastructure? What most people then do is they hire a salesperson and they give them a pat on the back and say, here you have a list, or go call someone in your own network and see if they might be interested in our solutions. And I think it all starts, and again, then we're coming back to marketing and sales working together. It all starts with to give the salesperson a mechanism to continuously book meetings with new people within their ICP. But in addition to that, is having a good idea about the offer and positioning about the company, having a good perspective on who is my ICP, what are the challenges, what are their pain points, what are their desires, what is the content that I can use in between calls to nurture people. Like, that is really the most critical infrastructure in place for a salesperson to be effective, instead of saying, well, just go sell, just go call, and see where it goes. Is it something that you see as well?
Yeah, 100%. I think that, and this is something I've probably realized more over the last couple of years than previously, that for smaller companies, as they're looking to expand, I would almost advocate that the first sales hire should be someone looking after existing customers, and trying to make sure that they are happy, because a lot of what you're talking about comes from your engagement with those people. You know, the case studies, the referenceability, the understanding of what the right ICP is, what value they're getting, what their pain points are.
Yes.
You know, and even within our business, frankly, we didn't do a good job of that in the first couple of years of our business. We were too focused on just trying to acquire new customers and not, you know, so we'd acquire a customer, implement them, and then kind of leave them be. And you get to a point where, yeah, you've got a bunch of customers, but you don't really know that much about them, because the people that sold to them probably aren't in the business anymore, right? And even the people that implemented the software might not be in the business anymore. So, you know, we found ourselves in this position last year where we were really struggling from a referenceability and a case study perspective, because we hadn't done that work up front. So yeah, having the right toolkit is absolutely vital. And it, as I said, it's kind of made me think about, you know, if I was in that position, where would I go from a higher perspective, to make sure that capability was solid in there.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to that most businesses don't really know and understand what value they already have within the business.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, if you talk to your current customers, like, what made them buy from you? What was the business value that they got out of it? Those types of things. There's so much low-hanging fruit within businesses that people just don't understand that it's there. Don't have the time for, maybe, to focus on, because they're just running the business. There's so much low-hanging fruit there that that is, it's almost annoying that companies are not really realizing that they have that, and they are focusing on only new and finding new things. So
yeah, and it is interesting. The other thing I would say about this, and again, this is something that I've thought about for a while, but probably realized more recently, is in a lot of that kind of area, and generally from a marketing perspective, actually, using someone from outside the business can be really, really powerful. I think, you know, we have a marketing department internally. They're great. They do a great job. A good bunch of people. They produce great content. They've got great ideas. But actually, what sometimes happens is you get a little bit insular. You lose the ability to be reflective to some extent. And having a third party, you know, conduct those interviews with customers, for example, or look at what your value messaging is, or look at what the perspective is on the target market and the ideal customer profile, just gives you something that will allow you to look at things a little bit differently. We did this last year. We engaged an external agency to start looking at some of that stuff, and the output of that, when they collaborated with our own team, was a much better website that had much better messaging on it, that really talked about what we do and how we do it and why we do it, and the why bit being the most important element of it. And that not only gave us all those benefits, but actually also enabled our own team in areas that we wouldn't have been able to do ourselves, because how do you go and find that different perspective unless you go externally? So yeah, I think that's, again, for smaller companies, when they're thinking about how they build up that kind of collateral that you're talking about, actually getting someone from outside to come and do it can make a huge difference.
Yeah, and as you might expect, I'm definitely an advocate for that. In this is what we
Of
see
course.
with clients as well. Like,
Yeah.
they're stuck in the day-to-day. They need an outside perspective, an honest perspective on things that we've seen working within other businesses. Actually pointing out that low-hanging fruit that we just talked about, and actually delivering upon it as well. So yeah, I'm definitely an advocate for that as well, as you might understand.
Yeah, 100%.
I want to round things off here in a second. I just want to maybe tap into and look a bit into the future.
Sure.
So we talked about digital transformation. We talked about marketing and sales, revenue enablement. Based on your perspective, like, where do you see the markets going? Where do you see technology going? Where do you see sales, marketing going? Any perspective that you can share on that?
Sure. I mean, AI and machine learning is on everyone's lips, right? And I find it an interesting conversation. One of my previous colleagues who I worked with for a number of years, when he was when he was talking to potential customers, he would always talk about appropriate automation rather than just automation. I think there's a lot of buzz around trying to automate everything, when in reality, not everything needs to be automated, and it ties back to that value conversation, right? What value are you going to get out of automating that piece? And it could be an efficiency saving or a monetary saving. It could be a well-being thing for the person that might be doing that job. It might be allow them to not have to do a menial task and therefore do something that's much more appealing and beneficial to them. But generally speaking, any software company that you look at right now, Salesforce have got massive ads about automation and CRM. NetSuite are talking about automation all over the place and building AI into lots of parts of the system, as are all of the other software vendors. We started looking at it. So it will become a real crucial element of how digital transformation builds. Again, I just think companies have to be thinking about where it makes sense to automate and use that technology. I get asked this quite a lot, actually, about where we're at in the transition from kind of on-premise solutions to cloud, and I still think there's quite a long way to go. So that move for companies to really expose themselves to the benefits of a cloud environment are still there, and lots of people have done it, but lots of people do. So I think that's going to be a continuing trend for probably the next decade, I would imagine, easily, before we get to a point where saturation becomes a challenge for some of these software companies. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they then take on that challenge, right? Because where do they go? If everyone's got a cloud system that's supposed to last forever, where do you go and get new customers? I think the consolidation will continue from a tech perspective. I do think that there's been a trend over the last few years for people to look for solutions that are much more broad in their nature. Therefore, they can have one solution that does many, many things rather than lots of solutions that have to integrate. And I think that trend will continue. I think that most of the major software vendors that I'm aware of are trying to build that out either internally in their own platform or by having partnerships around about that augment what they do as we do. So I think all of those things are trends that will become important and change the face of what we see from a technology perspective. UI and interface is a real big hot topic because as generations change, people like to look at things in a different way. So that's going to be something that I think will be a key element of that. From a sales and marketing perspective, I mean, automation is going to affect it, right? I've seen software where proposals are written. In fact, actually this morning we were looking at potentially a change of name for a product that we are developing, and one of my colleagues put some text into ChatGPT and came up with a list of possible names for it, right? So these types of things will affect everything that we do. I've seen software that writes email proposals for people that does outbound campaigning using automation and can. I've even seen ideas that automation can forecast for you, which I find quite difficult to figure out how that would happen. Although if it can do it and it's more accurate than what I can do, then that would be really good. But I think that sort of selection between a single organization that is all sales and marketing and related functions and separate streams within a business, I think that will continue, to be honest, because it's just the way some businesses operate. I suspect that newer businesses and scaling businesses will tend more to have this single kind of organizational structure because they'll see the benefits of it. But I think larger organizations will continue to go where they are. But one thing that I do think is going to be a big trend in that space is the increase of earned enablement. Generally speaking, right, Gen Z are motivated by development. As one of the principal elements that motivates people to stay with a business is how they're developing as an individual. And so that ability for companies, or not ability, that capability for companies to provide development plans, enablement across multiple streams of what happens in a business is going to become absolutely crucial to things like retention of staff and staff motivation and those types of things.
Yeah, and I think especially with AI, like it will not, or at least not yet, will be the silver bullet that is going to solve all business problems. As you mentioned yourself, we're still in that transition from on-premise to cloud. And well, for how many years has that already been running? I think the cloud hype was, at least 5 years ago already, maybe. Mm-hmm. So we might be seeing the same trajectory for AI and automation. And I think that you shared as well in terms of using AI. I've been reading a book in the last couple of days about those developments and making analogies from like electricity in the past or those types of things, how they made that transition. What you're seeing right now is really what they call point solutions.
Yeah.
So individual things, individual use cases that you can use AI for, which is great, which will add benefit to the business. But what you're actually looking for in the end is system solutions, actually operating your business as a whole in a holistic way with AI in that sense. And that will still probably take a couple of years until we actually see that based on the learnings that we will have in the next couple of years. So yeah, the future is uncertain. I think there's a lot of interesting developments. We'll just have to see where it goes.
I guess the one constant is things will change, Jasper, right? So, and as with all of these things, the people that embrace that change, adopt it and run with it will be the ones that are typically more successful than those that don't. So again, from a business perspective and the clients that you deal with, it's kind of understanding how you do that and what value you're going to get out of it, right? So that's crucial.
Yeah, and things will change and a lot of things will stay the same as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, Chris. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
You did as well.
Yeah.
If someone is listening right now, wants to connect with you, wants to learn a little bit more about ProScope for NetSuite, where can they find you?
LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me and ProScope for NetSuite. For some reason, I think I must have been the first Chris Muir on LinkedIn because my LinkedIn address is just Chris Muir after all the usual LinkedIn stuff, so it should be quite easy to find. And ProScope for NetSuite's a pretty easy search. Our website is proscope.cloud, so if someone wanted to look at that, they could do. But yeah, pretty easy to get in touch with.
Yeah, I'll make sure the links are in the description as well, so people can find you well.
Cool.
Well, thanks again, Chris. Thanks again for a great conversation, and good luck with everything that you're doing.
Thank you, and same to you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Jasper.
Thank you.